In this short video, we'll explore one of the most fundamental skills you will need in university, critical thinking. Developing your critical thinking skills will help you develop balanced arguments, express yourself clearly, and read for important information. To start off, it's important to understand what critical thinking is. Rather than just accepting information as true and static, critical thinking involves asking further questions like, how do we know? Or, is that true for every case or just this instance? Critical thinkers possess and develop characteristics such as curiosity, humility, willingness to examine their own beliefs, ability to distinguish between facts and opinion, as well as seeking clarification. Critical thinking is about being skeptical and challenging assumptions rather than memorizing facts or blindly accepting what is said. Think about if you were reading a history textbook. You might ask, who wrote this and what biases might they have? For example, the person who wrote it may have a very limited scope of research that only focuses on a particular group within the population. In that case, there would be other sides to the story. The building blocks you need for good critical thinking are background knowledge, the more the better, some criteria for judgment, critical thinking vocabulary, thinking strategies, like asking yourself questions as you read, and habits of mind, like not accepting something as true until you have had the time to examine the available evidence. Now here are 4 ways to begin building some critical thinking skills. First, read for understanding. That means not necessarily reading every word, but making sure you understand the concept or the motives behind what is written. Then try separating hard facts from the arguments or claims that the author is making. Thirdly, ask for clarification of thinking. Don't assume you know what someone means or why they're saying it. Lastly, always reflect on what you have learned. Is it true all the time? How did you arrive to your conclusions? There are many ways to critically think and take shorthand notes as you read. Here's one example, but feel free to develop your own shorthand style when reading or taking notes. In this example, we've used I to demark important, L to mean learned something new, and an exclamation mark to mean that a big idea surfaced. Critical thinking also involves being able to express yourself clearly. Most important is stating one point at a time. Don't try to argue every thought you've ever had. Just stick to your main arguments. This will allow others to clearly follow your thinking. Also, it's good to elaborate on your thinking. For more abstract ideas, assume that your audience may not understand. Provide examples, analogies, or metaphors where you can. When you are trying to clarify your thinking for others, consider the following 8 elements. What is the purpose? What question are we trying to answer? What point of view is being expressed? What assumptions are we or others making? What do we know, and how do we know it? What are the concepts we're working with? What are the conclusions, and do they make sense? And finally, what are the implications? Some good habits to have when thinking critically are being open-minded, having respect for the truth, which means being open to having your opinion changed, having respect for others, being independent, being fair-minded, having respect for reason, having an inquiring mind rather than making assumptions, and having an intellectual work ethic. This means that you are always questioning, especially your own conclusions. Here are some strategies for practicing your critical thinking. 1. Use wasted time. Rather than vegetate, try learning something new or exploring a new subject. 2. Redefine the way you see things. What's more boring than always thinking the same way? Challenge yourself to see things you're familiar with in new ways. And 3rd, analyze the influences in your life. Why do you think or feel the way you do? Use your wasted time. Determine when you do your best thinking and try to learn something new during that part of the day. Think about things that frustrated you during the day and how you would do things differently to not get hung up. One of the best ways to approach a problem with a critical mind is to first consider the problem in all of its possible implications. This can be done by putting yourself in someone else's shoes and thinking about what this situation might be like for all parties involved. In doing this, you will define the problem from all angles to make the best decision. List all of your concerns with the problem, what you will need to solve it, who can help, what some possible barriers might be, etc. And finally, reframe the problem as an opportunity. What better way to practice critical thinking than to try to find a solution where there seems to be none? Think about who in your life influences you. Do you feel or react a certain way because of social convention or because you believe it is what is expected of you? Try to break out of that mold if it is constricting you. Remember that critical thinking is a fundamental skill for a university student, but it doesn't stop there. It's an ongoing process and requires lifelong learning. But once you incorporate it into your life, it will start to become second nature.